This episode of the GolfWRX shop is brought to you by Fujikura Ventus with Velo Core technology. The Ventus line has expanded and now has 3 shaft profiles to fit your desired ball flight. Ventus Red for mid-high ball flight with mid-spin, Ventus Blue for mid-launch and low spin, and Ventus Black for low launch and low spin. So go ahead and find your local Fujikura dealer by visiting fujikura.com and try Ventus with Velo Core out for yourself. Hey, what's up? It's Knudson, GolfWRX. I'm back down here in the shop, and today we're going to install some stability putter shafts. If you haven't heard of stability putter shafts by Beakthrough Golf Technology, you probably will. You're seeing more action on tour and things like that. But before we get to installing these, go ahead and click subscribe, and also like the video if you do. The more subscribers we have, the more likes on our videos, the more opportunities we get to bring you this type of content. So if you do like it, subscribe and like the video if you do. But again, today we're going to install some stability putter shafts. Now, if you haven't heard of stability, it's Beakthrough Golf Technology, or BGT, and they make the original stability putter shaft. Now, this is about half the shaft. It's not the full thing. But what they're doing is basically making a graphite or composite putter shaft that actually glues into a section of the existing putter shaft you have. And what they're doing is basically making an extremely stable putter shaft that reduces motion through the stroke or unwanted motion, and also helps return the putter face to square at impact. So they found that through all their testing that the steel putter shafts that are out there are usually pretty inexpensive, and they have a lot of inconsistencies to them. So they went out and designed this. Now, I've been fit at a club champion for one of these before, and I did notice differences in how square that face angle was at impact. So there is something to it. It does work. But they have the original here, which you've might have seen already, and then they just this year, or just recently, brought out the Stability Tour. And the Tour is basically the exact same performance as the standard stability shaft, just a slightly slimmer kind of profile. It kind of tapers down, so it looks thinner when you set it down. And it also has kind of a black tip on it, so it's a little more uniform. And then if you have a straight or plumber's neck type putter, they have a black steel tip section that matches. So they took some feedback from tour pros and regular golfers like you and me, and designed this as a kind of an updated version to the standard. But you can get either one. They're both available. So we're going to install them because they are a little bit unique. They're not extremely difficult to install. They're just something different than a standard putter shaft. So we're going to put the Stability Tour into a standard plumber's neck putter there, my old Odyssey ProType number 7. It's kind of the trusty guy I've had for years. We're going to install that in that putter. And then the standard stability, the original, we're going to put into my new Odyssey Black Ten. So just got this guy. We're going to put it in there. So we're going to install these, show you how it's done. Like I said, nothing crazy, not too hard. With these, I would say get fit though. If you want to invest the money into one of these shafts, it's probably worth it to go do a putter fitting, see how putt with it, see how it improves your putting, see the numbers, the difference, and also maybe find the correct putter for you. So I would suggest find your local fitter and go that route. But if you don't, you can always get the shaft yourself like me and install them into your putters. So the first one we're going to do is the straight putter shaft here. It's kind of the easiest. It's pretty straightforward. But we're going to do that one first, and then we'll do the double bend in a minute because it is a little different, but again, pretty easy. So BGT will send you all the stuff you need for install. You just contact them. They're super helpful. When I told them what putters I had, they were able to send me the correct shafts, because these do come in different tip sizes depending on the type of putter you have. So always give them a call, find out, let them know what putter you have. They'll be able to recommend the right size and shaft for you. So, but again, they send you all the stuff you need. So let's go ahead and do the straight install first on my old ProType, and like I said, get it done, and it should look pretty cool. All right, so the first thing you want to do, or what BGT, Beakthrough Golf Technology, recommends, is measuring your loft lie length on your putter before starting any of this. That way, after you build it, you can make sure to go back to those original specs if those are the specs that you really want. Now, this is a straight shaft installation, meaning this is a plumber's neck putter. So basically, the shaft that went in here, which is a straight putter shaft, had no bend to it, anything like that. So this one is a straight putter shaft install. Now, again, these work for double bends or flow necks. They pretty much make something for any putter you have out there. Again, contact BGT and they'll be able to kind of recommend the right setup. So for the tour, what they're trying to do is make a little nicer aesthetic look. So basically, a matte black shaft tip, and then that will match the black aluminum tip here and the graphite section. So it's all kind of one look. So what we're going to do is basically glue the tip section into the shaft and then also into the head. So it's all going to be one piece. But what you want to do is first pull the shaft out of your putter. And again, putters can have different hosel sizes. So there's 370 or 355. Again, if you call BGT, they'll be able to walk you through it, tell you which one you need. This one here is a 370 in the old ProTypes. So what you're going to do is basically mark off, because you want to prep this this tip section. You know, since it's just a matte finish on here, it's matte paint. You'll want to prep it, give it a little sand, so that way the epoxy, when you epoxy it together, holds together well. So what I like to do is take a little painter's tape, set the shaft into the stability section of the shaft, so set the tip, and then just put a little painter's tape on there, and that way you'll know how much prep to do on the shaft. Now with this, so you'll see here that this section here is what I'm going to actually prep. So I'm going to sand this a little bit, take some of this paint off so that way it adheres inside this tip really well. Then I'm also going to do the same thing with the putter head. So take the other end, this is the end that's going into the shaft, and put it into your putter. And again, I'm using painter's tape. You could use a Sharpie, anything like that, and mark off kind of where you need to prep. So that way you don't prep too much and have it kind of come up and be visible on these shafts. And then just take a little bit of sandpaper. This is just sandpaper I've laying around. This is 150 grit. And then just give it a little sand. Doesn't have to be crazy, anything like that. We just want to rough up the surface to give the epoxy something to adhere to. So again, I'm not worried about, taking off the finish or anything like that. I'm just kind of, roughing this up. And I'm making sure to kind of stay away from this tip because I don't want to see any of this sanded section on the after install. So I'm kind of staying away from there, and like I said, make sure that it doesn't go by the tape. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the putter section. I'm going to kind of just hold it like this and give it a little twist. Perfect. That way, this is going to adhere better in both components. So once you get these prepped, sand them down and then wipe them off. Make sure you don't get any excess on there. I use old golf towels that are laying around and wipe off the excess. And then what you want to do is mix some, regular shaft epoxy. So you don't have to, buy anything different or new or crazy. Take off your tape. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically install this into the shaft first and let it dry, and then we'll go ahead and put it into the putter head. So as you can see, got it set up. You're not going to see any of the sanding area. It's going to look really, really smooth and have a better look to it. So what you want to do is mix your two-part epoxy, and depending on whatever epoxy you have, mix to their instructions. So mine is, equal parts, and I, of course, do it by eye. If you don't feel comfortable with that, you can definitely do it by weight or volume, whatever the manufacturer suggests. But I've been using the same epoxy for a long time, so I'm going to do it by eye. So once you get that set, make sure to mix it really well. I use an old shop pencil, the old shop pencil to mix it.
But go ahead and mix that epoxy up really well. You know, you don't want the bond to be bad or anything like that. So mix it up for a minute or two there as best you can. And it doesn't have to be, you know, I don't use 5-minute anymore. This is what they call tour sets. This is like an hour and a half cure time. I mean, full cure is 24 hours, but they say usable cure is an hour and a half. So what you want to do is basically take this and put a little bit of this epoxy into the end of your shaft and just kind of coat the walls the best you can. And this doesn't, you don't need to glob it on. This doesn't have to be dripping with epoxy. A thin coat is all you need. And then take your epoxy here and kind of work it onto the tip of the shaft that's already sanded, that's going to go into this shaft. And again, this doesn't have to be globbed on. You know, a thin coat is all you need to bond it. So work a little on there, and then scrape off any excess you might have. And again, my trick, take your old GolfWRX catalogs that we all get from doing shop work, and mix your epoxy on here. And after you do a couple, tear the sheet off, throw it away. Brand new thing to mix your epoxy on. So then once this is here, take it, insert it into the shaft, and just give it a little spin as you insert it. Kind of make sure everything gets coated until it stops, because it's going to hit the bottom in here. And this you just want to wipe off with some paper towel, shop rag, whatever you have. All right, so then you just take this, clean it off. All right, so that side part's set. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue both of them at the same time. So I'm going to basically glue this to the head as well. So I've got just enough epoxy here to basically do this. So I'm going to basically put a little in the head, and then same thing, put a little in the hosel there, and then take your whatever epoxy you got left there, and kind of work a little bit just over the tip of the shaft there. Again, doesn't have to be anything globbed on. Kind of the less is more kind of theory here on epoxy. And the same thing, once this one is done up, you want to take it. The same thing, give it just a little twist as you go in. And then also make sure your graphics are kind of down, so because you don't want to see them, or at least if you don't, make sure the graphics are kind of down. And then, again, takes a little paper towel, shop rag, and wipe off the excess epoxy. All right, so once that's done, what you want to do, again, after you wipe off the epoxy, make sure this is, logo down if you want it, however you want to align the graphics. And once it's set, we're going to set it aside and let it dry.
So while I'm waiting for that Stability Tour shaft to set, what I'm going to do is start doing up the double bend shaft in my Odyssey Black Ten. Now these with the double bend, as they call it, double bend, there's some that are single bend. If your shaft has basically a bend to it, right now you can choose still either the Stability Tour or the Standard. The Standard might blend a little better because it's got this gray aluminum tip that may match the chrome part of the shaft, because you're going to actually use part of this shaft with the Stability shaft. So again, VGT is going to send you everything you need to do this. But again, when you call them, let them know what putter you have. They'll be able to kind of walk you through what size tip you need on the shaft and all that. And then they also send you a little gauge so you can basically tell, what shaft or what size shaft this is. Now with this, the Stroke Labs, they actually kind of, the Stroke Labs are half graphite and then half steel as well. So I actually pulled that shaft because it's really big. It actually, the flare on it, the steps are really large. They're bigger than 390, which is the largest tip that I think BGT makes. But they basically send you a little gauge so you can basically put on the shaft, make sure that it's the right length. So this is a 370. So I took an old double bend shaft that I had laying around and glued it into my Odyssey 10. Now, like I said, if you call them and ask, they'll be able to walk you through it and get you the correct shaft, so you won't have to do that. So then what they send you is, since you're going to basically use part of this shaft and the BGT shaft together, you're going to have to cut this shaft. So if you have something like a rare Scotty Cameron or something like that that's got a shaft that you want to keep, you're probably going to want to buy another shaft for it so you can cut it. Because, like I said, to install this BGT shaft on anything that has a bend, you're going to have to cut the shaft. And I know some of them have shaft bands or other things, or they're limited editions. So again, if you want, to save the shaft, buy a second shaft. You can go on GolfWRX or somewhere like that and buy another shaft for your putter. Once you have your putter, BGT sends you this black tubing, which is just kind of for like, AV cables, things like that, wire organization. And you're just going to basically pop this on the shaft. And this is going to tell you how much shaft you're going to need to use. So basically you're going to put this on, push it all the way down so it's flat against the top of the putter, and you're going to mark at the top here with a Sharpie, or you can use tape again. And basically this is how much shaft you're going to use. So once you mark it, you're going to know that this is where you're going to cut it. So this is the amount of shaft you're going to use. So what you're going to do is, after you cut it, you're going to take this and actually slide it on and epoxy it onto this shaft. So once you mark it, you're going to use your standard cutting wheel like you would any steel shaft or graphite shaft, and cut this off and basically toss this. So let's cut this down and we'll kind of dry fit everything and make sure it looks good. All right, so this is one of those things you definitely want to wear your eye protection, and also maybe even if you have a pair of gloves or something to put them on. Now this, you want to be careful, because typically when I cut graphite shafts, I cut them this way, but I've got a sanding belt on there and I don't want to damage the putter head. So double check before you cut this that nothing's gonna get caught or anything, because cutting a putter shaft this low is typically something you don't do. Now also too, make sure double check your length with that tubing that BGT sends. Measure twice, cut once, because not a whole lot of going back from this other than buying a new shaft. So I'm going to cut it this way to make sure nothing gets caught over here, and try to cut it as straight as possible, so when you insert it into that stability putter section, it's as flush as it can be. So this is just another cut-off wheel, and we're just going to cut this off. And then after you cut it, give it a little sand to take off any sharp edges. So this is pretty much all you're left with, is that amount of putter, which is kind of funny looking, but that's how it's designed. So once you have this, we're going to go ahead and dry fit the rest of the section and mark it off and sand it like before. All right, so once this is cut off, sand down the tip a little bit. What you want to do is take your stability shaft and just dry fit it in here. Make sure that everything fits tight, so that way you'll make sure everything's tight. Make sure you got the right tip on the right shaft, and then also mark this off, because again, we're going to want to prep this a little bit. We're going to want to sand it, that way we get a good bond from the epoxy. So again, I take a little bit of painter's tape and go right around where the putter will be
for the shaft install. So that way I know I'm not going to over prep and have any of that sanded shaft visible. Now this one you can do with sandpaper again, just by hand. If you have a little sanding belt, you can do it on there. You're just basically taking some of that chrome finish and just trying to rough it up a little bit. That way it sticks better with the with the epoxy. So I'm going to go ahead and use my belt sander again, just because I have it and it's a little faster, and sand this up. All right, so once that's done, clean it off. And again, it doesn't have to be crazy, whatever. You're just trying to rough it up enough, where you have this nice matte finish so it grabs the epoxy when it's glued in. So once you got that done, we're going to go ahead and mix up some more epoxy and glue the shaft together. It's pretty much that simple. So just like last time, we're going to use our little GolfWRX catalog. And again, mix a little epoxy. I do it by visual. If you want to know a great way to mix epoxy, our boy Ryan Barath on his show, or he has a YouTube video, if you search on GolfWRX, that talks all about epoxy, and he gets way more into it than I do. But, so far it hasn't failed me yet. So again, like before, you want to mix this really well. I use just an old shop pencil and kind of fold it over and mix it, just making sure everything gets fully cured. Or fully mixed, fully mixed, geez. So do that. And once this is done, we're going to do the same thing we did before. So we're going to take the shaft and put some epoxy on the pencil there, and then just kind of work it on the inside of the shaft. Kind of coat it as best we can. Again, we don't need a ton. We don't need it dripping out of here or spilling out. Just enough to coat the inside of the shaft. And then take our putter that we cut off, and on that section that's been prepped, the same thing. Put a little bit of epoxy on there, just a thin coat. Doesn't have to be anything crazy. We're not looking to add the most amount of epoxy possible. We want a real thin layer here. And if you get too much, you can always scrape some off using your pencil, or if you use some type of plastic spread or anything like that, you can basically take some off. But kind of do as much as you can here. Get a little bit more, and once it's coated, we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to slide in the shaft and kind of twist it. Get my paper towel ready to wipe off any excess. And the same thing here. We're going to basically put these two together and kind of twist them as they slide in to kind of make sure everything's coated as best as we can. So then once it's in, whoops, a little epoxy. So you got a little too much there, but wipe off any excess on there. And once you have all the excess wiped off, again, if you want, make sure the graphics are down if you want. If you want them up, that's fine too, if you don't care. I want my graphics down. And then once the graphics are down, set it aside there and, wait for it to dry. So once these are dry, we're going to go ahead and cut them down to length, throw some grips on, and we'll be ready to putt.
All right, so once everything's dry, whatever epoxy you use, whether it's 24-hour, 5-minute, whatever, once everything's dry and cured, you're going to take your putter, which is the raw length, and you want to measure it, cut it to length, and grip it like a standard putter. So if you don't have a specific putter measuring ruler, easy way to do it, take your tape measure that you have, preferably one that locks at a certain, locks so it doesn't retract. But take your tape measure, and basically run the tape measure down the exact, same angle as the shaft, and mark it at whatever length. So if you have, only one hand, which is kind of tough, basically set it against your workbench, grab your Sharpie, and measure it.
So run your tape measure down the shaft here. I know I'm making it sound easier than it really is, but run your tape measure down, and then at whatever length. So for me, I play just about 33 inches, just over. So I'm going to mark this at 33. And then once that's done, once you mark it, you're going to want to take it over to your cutting wheel and cut it to length, and then we'll grip it up. So let's cut it and grip it. Now again, when you're cutting these, make sure you wear some eye protection, even maybe if you got some gloves. And now these they're thick, heavy graphite, so make sure you move slow when cutting them on your wheel. Don't try to force it and bog down the machine or anything. Just move slow. You don't want to damage anything or anything like that. So again, these are thick, so move slow. Let the wheel do the work, and measure twice. That's for sure. And then again, if you want to run a quick sand just to take off the edges. Then we're ready to, once it's cut off and sanded, we're ready to tape it, grip it, and go putt. So do that with the other one as well. The tour shaft, the exact same thing. Alright, so once you're done gripping it, let your grip dry, whether it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever kind of solvent, tape, all that you use. Once your grip's dry on there, you're good to go. Take it out to the putting green and start experiencing, straighter, more consistent putts for yourself. So if you have any questions, let me know. Also check out Breakthrough Golf Technology's website. There'll be a link below. If you want more information on the shafts, there's also an article on GolfWRX.com that our great guy Ryan Barath did. There'll be a link to that in the description below. So click on it, read a little more info about these shafts. But yeah, really great. Actually kind of easy to install, but look kind of cool. You'll have the standard here, which you can tell has a little thicker section, tapers down, and then the chrome. And then you have the tour version, which is definitely more tapered, looks more slim, and a little more, stealth looking, especially in a raw head. So very cool looking. I'm going to get out, putt with these, and see if they help me make more putts. But again, if you like what you see, click like below, subscribe, and we'll see you next time down here in the GolfWRX shop.